Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of UIC Liberty TV. My name is Joseph Patterson, and with me tonight is Fred Corbin from the beautiful island of Barbados, and no stranger to Jamaica. He has been here many times and will be back here soon again for some very special event. He will be receiving a very important award for his human rights effort. So I'm looking forward to seeing him again soon here in Jamaica. But everyone, the topic tonight is a little unusual compared to most of our other discussions. Tonight we're talking about foreign affairs, so to speak, and what's really happening in the world. You see, we have one president in the US going out, another president coming in, but in between the coming and the goings are decision makings. And these decisions can be quite catastrophic or beneficial, depending on what side of the fence you're sitting on when it's happening. And so tonight we're going to be talking about World War II and is it just about to happen? Mr. Corbin, good night, sir. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm great. Pleasure to be here.
Good. And I see on your shirt it says the outlaw.
That's correct.
The outlaw. Wow. The engineer outlaw.
Yep.
Welcome to all our friends online, wherever you are around the world. I see Juliet is on bright and early, saying UIC for a better Jamaica, better quality education, educate the people for the Jamaica that we want. Enough is enough. And I see Miss Claudia Barrett on, GenSec. Good night, Miss Barrett. Good to see you on. I see Carla Spence as well. One perfect love. Good to see you on, Carla. Carol, rather. So, Mr. Corbin, kick us off. What's happening in the world today around this World War II issue? What is your perspective on all of this?
Well, let's just be clear that this is actually World War III.
Did I say World War II?
Yes.
Oh my goodness! Maybe I'm hoping it's yes,
but,
World War III.
But
yes,
it's extremely relevant, and I'll tell you
Yeah.
I'll tell you the reason why the relevancy between World War II and World War III.
Mm-hmm.
In 1856, a Freemason gentleman by the name of Albert Pike, the creator of the Illuminati from the Freemasonry movement,
Mm-hmm.
issued a directive to his counterpart in Europe, laying out the directives of the Illuminati to create 3 world wars.
Mm-hmm.
The First World War, which was to foment Europe into a paradigm where they would be creating the destruction of the Ottoman Empire by pitting Christendom against the Muslim world. And that was achieved. The Second World War was extremely important because it took the entire Western world and pitted it against a European creation in Adolf Hitler's Nazi Party, which was to usher in the creation of the Jewish state under the Balfour Declaration, which was drawn up in 1917 during the First World War. That particular creation of the Nazi Party, which was Adolf Hitler's National Alliance, created in 1933 when he came to power, and then the Zionist Party of America. That's where you get NAZI, National Alliance Zionists. Okay, that's the Nazi Party. The Zionist movement, which was the progenitor of the Balfour Declaration, utilizing Lord Balfour's his relationship with the Rothschild family, created the entire finance structure for Adolf Hitler to create Nazi Germany. The Rothschilds funded World War II.
Sure. There's always a set of oligarchs behind any of these wars that you see going on, and there's always an end game. It's not simply a war; it's a war with a purpose.
That's
The
correct.
purpose is not normally clear to the onlookers. So, for example, many young men may be sent off to war thinking they're fighting for freedom. They're fighting to liberate a particular set of people, or they're fighting to defend or spread democracy or something, when in fact that's not what they're fighting for. They're fighting for a cause that if they understood it, they would never go to fight in the first place.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Let's
But
welcome Mr. Edward Shields now before we continue. Mr. Shields, good evening. How are you?
Good evening, gentlemen. Doing very fine this evening. I'm glad to join you in the discussion, and I see Fred is here kicking things off. So thank you.
Wonderful. Just for the benefit of our audience, Mr. Shields, where are you calling in from?
Calling in from New York at the moment. Yeah.
All right. So we
And
have
it's
good connection. Sorry, go
yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, it's a big holiday here, but I'm here for this program.
It's Thanksgiving, right? Yeah.
That's correct. Yes.
So that's when you guys kill turkeys and
when they kill turkeys.
all right. Okay. Poor turkeys, but welcome and good to have you on. So we have
Thank
New
you.
York in the house. So we have the American representation, which is good. And we have two Caribbean people here, Jamaica and Barbados. So quite an international connection here tonight. So Mr. Shields, Mr. Corbin was just explaining to us the continuum from World War I to World War II and setting us up to understand how that feeds into World War III. But he mentioned something very important about World War I. He talked about the Ottoman Empire. And I'm sure many of our viewers may not be so au fait with history to understand the whole Ottoman Empire. So let's rewind a little, Mr. Corbin, to World War I and tell us who were the major players, what was the Ottoman Empire, and what does this all mean for us? So give us a little bit more on World War I so we understand the context leading into II.
Well, World War I was fomented by the Zionist Party as well as a number of other players. And
The Zionist Party? Who is the Zionist Party?
the Zionist Party is the creation of the Zionist movement, Zionism,
And what is that?
and that is actually the descendant of a 6,000-year-old death cult known as the Khazarian Mafia.
Okay. And where are they from?
They are originally from the land of Canaan.
Okay.
They
So
were
were
the first. They were the first person
Mhm.
that Joshua in the Bible when Joshua took down the walls of Jericho.
Mhm.
That the very first battle that Joshua fought was against the Khazarian Mafia. At that time, they were known as the Amalekites. That's their origin. A
So for those
6,000-year-old death cult. The only thing they know is war, death, and destruction.
So for those people who are watching and who are Bible believers, you're saying that a group that was called the Amalekites that Joshua defeated when they overthrew Canaan emerged into being a death cult.
That's correct. When Joshua drove them out of the land of Canaan and scattered them,
Yeah.
the land that they occupied and settled in is present-day Ukraine.
Oh, so the land is present-day Ukraine. Now that's quite a connection there.
There you go.
Quite a connection to see that, So here we are, the Zionist movement, which became a very strong movement.
That's correct.
You say that they are committed to war and death
And destruction. That's the
and
only thing they know.
But why? What is their ultimate objective? What are they trying to achieve?
Well, it's written in scripture. Okay,
Mhm.
thou shalt have war with Amalek from generation to generation.
Okay.
Who are the Amalekites?
Okay, but I know the Zionist movement played a
Yeah.
very big role now coming into World War II.
That's correct.
The Zionist movement was a big player behind the scenes in getting what we now know as Israel to be given to a group of people who call themselves the Jews, and then become the Jewish state that is at the center of the Middle East conflicts.
Yes, what we have to recognize as well is that the Zionist movement in its early days, they were known for Zionism, but then the adoption of the Jewish faith
Mm-hmm.
in order to be able to get to the position where using the financing from the Rothschild family, which are descendants, direct family descendants of the Khazars, Khazarian mafia,
Mm-hmm.
brought into being the so-called Jewish solution.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where Lord Balfour, in his position with the British Crown, looked at Palestine and said, this is the only place that we can legally, under the British Constitution, with regard to its colonies, we can allocate that. The Second World War was fomented. Adolf Hitler was funded and directed by the Zionist Party in order to create the world attention and the pity, as it were. Oh, we pity the poor Jews because they're being persecuted by Adolf Hitler. That was the plan.
Right. So basically, they used war, they used death and destruction and massive deception to create a Jewish state.
That's right. They got the entire world to accept the fact that allegedly 6 million Jews were murdered by the Nazi Party and the Gestapo and the Waffen SS and the Wehrmacht army and so on, in order to be able to justify taking the Balfour Declaration and creating the State of Israel and embarking immediately on the genocide of the Palestinian people.
Now, bear in mind, that what you just said a while ago would earn you the title of being anti-Semitic, right?
Yeah.
And then you'd be canceled if you were living in certain societies because you're not allowed to say that.
Yeah, I understand.
And this is one way of censoring people, because you're censoring freedom of speech, because the only way for people to learn, is if they can hear from others freely.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
If you cannot hear from your fellow human beings, whether you agree with them or not, then you're missing out on the opportunity for growth, because growth only comes by exposure, and exposure only comes by freedom of speech. So, Mr. Shields, just to bring you into the conversation here, have you heard anything so far from Mr. Corbin that has raised your eyebrows, or I didn't know that, or here is something in addition to that you want to share with us?
Well, I I kind of take a different approach or a different view. Not that I disagreed with anything that Fred says, but where do I start? Because this is such a big topic, and we're going back 5,000 years in history to try to analyze it. So let me approach it from a metaphysical point of view, which is an area that I have some expertise in, to shed a different light, or at least a complementary light, or see from a different perspective, not necessarily to disagree with anything said so far. The way I see it, it's basically world domination, it's global domination. And how do you achieve that? You had Alexander the Great, he fought a lot of wars. You have, Genghis Khan, you had so many, you have Napoleon. And the goal when a civilization reaches a certain level is usually to take over all their enemies, and to bring them under some kind of centralized system where even religions will be merged and created, as we saw with Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, when that conquest took place. And we saw it again. This might be shocking to some people, but we saw it again in Christianity around the first century AD with Caesar's messiahs, right? Giving us many of the books that we read today. So what I'm trying to say is that there is two schools of thought in going about that. There's a Western approach and there's the Eastern approach. Now, you can argue back and forth which one works, which one is good, which one is bad, or which one is evil, but they're just approach. So on the Eastern side, you have the approach of religion, love, unity, harmony, right, through Buddha and through other saintly type So you're pulling energy through. The goal is always to have a single point where everything flows into. And it's no different now that they're trying to achieve a rules based order, because the rules based order is going to do that. It's going to establish one person, one center, one pole, the same way in which the celestial bodies travel around the star Polaris is to recreate that system here on Earth in our social systems, right? Through war. So I talk about the eastern side. So you have the western side. The western side, you know, is more manipulative and wants results, and it's both sides use force when necessary, or have to be able to defend themselves. When Alexander the Great went to India, he met with a mighty Indian army and had to turn back. So it's not that the rules of life. We're living in a planet that where war is the essence of things in a dualistic world, right?
Hmm.
Uh-huh. So
But
go ahead.
well, you mentioned something very interesting earlier. You talked about the merging of religions. And I want to come back to Fred in a bit on this because there are religious overtones from the very beginning of what Mr. Corbin was saying. But you mentioned during the time of early Christendom, if you will, with the Romans, what merger did you see happening there in the religious
Well, a
sphere? What?
great merger occurred there. It's under research in the West. It's hidden in the West. It's a topic all by itself. But let me finish the question first between that is more relevant to what Fred was saying.
Mhm.
We can get back to that question that you're asking right now, because an interesting and big topic. Um, so on the western side, you have the Phoenicians, right? So these are more blood cult. Fred referred to them as the Canaanites and so on, and linked it into the Bible. So how do I put it? Uh, One system is that you elevate your consciousness and you come into some kind of a ethereal field, and through this harmony you create civilization. The other is a sense where you join a debt cult, where blood is the currency, not money. And you see that in the mafia, you see that in transaction in politics. And I must also say that you can't have politics without religion, and you can't have religion without politics. Both of them are intertwined.
You're dropping a lot of bombs here, and I try not to interrupt too much, but I always want to make sure we don't jump over certain things. When you say blood as currency, break that down for our audience. What do you mean by that? And when you say that if you need politics to have religion and religion to have politics, I want to understand that as well. So first of all, when you say blood as currency, what do you mean? Versus, of course, we know money.
Well, for example, you know, you may have what is known as the black nobility, right? So the black nobility is a group of people that, because they're the black nobility, you can't know who they are. And if any of them reveal who they are, the consequences is death. So that's where debt becomes the currency. You're in
Okay.
the mafia and you break the rules, the consequences is
Okay.
death,
All
right?
right. I get it.
You join certain organizations,
Hmm.
and you take certain secret oaths. They're not transacting in money anymore. You can't come with $1 million as indulgence of forgiveness of sin. No.
Okay, I follow you. I now understand. So it's not so much the idea of currency the way I was thinking of it in terms of trade. It's a matter of you're signing a contract, and the contract is signed in blood. So you cannot break it by any other means but death, if that's the case. So I get it.
That's the only, either your personal, that is correct, because it's an irreversible contract when you sign it.
Right. Yes.
You
And
go
some
in, but there's no coming out of that contract. There's no
it
cancellation.
yeah, it's sealed. It's sealed in blood, and it ends in blood, one way or the other. So I get that. Now, when you say, and I'm coming back to you, Fred, because I'm gonna follow the continuum you're on, which is on the three world wars, and we've done one and two already, and number three is on its way now. But Mr. Shields, when you say you can't have religion without politics and politics without religion, explain that for our audience.
Well, it has to do more with culture than anything else, because if you're a politician in any culture, right? And we are in our world, the Caribbean, it's Western culture,
Mm-hmm.
and in our world, the Caribbean, it's Christian culture, right?
Mm.
Right. So, yes, there is a Hindu influence. You go to Guyana, you go to Trinidad, and there might be a strong Muslim influence as well. But the overwhelming influence is Christian. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So that will form the backbone, or the structure that any politician will aspire to or use in developing policy, in meeting the needs of the people, in defining happiness, and that kind of, even
Oh,
laws
yeah,
regarding debt and sentencing,
fully understood.
capital punishment.
I know you're so right, because so basically what you're saying is the politician, I mean, culture always trumps everything else. Whatever is the culture that has been, you know, bred into a people, that influences every area of life. And so politics is no exception. Once the people have been cultured to a particular way of thinking and looking at, the world, especially from a divine perspective, that's why I used to have those who are kings and queens, because of divine order. We're told that God intended it to be so, and that kept them there for a long time. So here in Jamaica and the Barbados and other countries, I'm sure, even in the US recently, you saw the role, the very distinct role that religion played. You had one president, one candidate that was heavily sponsored and supported by the Christian community, so to speak, and another candidate that made some serious mistakes in how she responded to and related to that side of the spectrum, and there are some consequences there. So, very good point. Back to you, Mr. Corbin. So, we have evolved from the Ottoman Empire to Nazi Germany, and the creation of the Zionist state in the form of Israel in Palestine, and of course the onslaught against the Palestinian people, different forms of genocide, if you will, and the backlash. But behind all of this, though, there is also a monetary side, wasn't there, in terms of oil?
Well, that is correct. We have to remember that Standard Oil, which was the first state-owned, well, not state-owned, but private oil company um, in the United States of America. Standard Oil actually supplied all of the lubricants to fight both wars. And when the formation of Israel took place, it allowed a foothold into the Middle East, which had not been there before. And while the British themselves had consolidated a foothold in Egypt, and they had developed Cairo and Alexandria and so on and so forth, they did not have the foothold in almost the epicenter of where they needed to be. And in 1947, upon the formation of the State of Israel, Standard Oil put in motion the legislation as well as the geopolitical frameworks that resulted in OPEC, oil produced and exported countries. And that then went forward from there. Now, how does this tie into World War III and what we're facing today? Lots of people don't really understand that World War III can be triggered from three different directions. Russia-Ukraine conflict, Russia, Syria, and Israel conflict, which the two proxies of Iran, Hamas and Hezbollah, are fighting for the salvation of Palestine. Once again, Palestine is at the epicenter of the situation. Why is it that the Palestinian people have become the pawns in this game of regional domination in the Middle East? And then the third trigger point is Saudi Arabia and Iran creating the geopolitical ally together to create the second largest armed force in the Middle East. Now, It is ironic that the Sunni Muslims and the Shiite Muslims, they actually hate each other. But here it is, you have the two largest countries of both religious sects now joining forces to create an alliance in the Middle East, which forms the second largest armed force, which is backed by the geopolitical alliances of defense, technological, and economic cooperation agreements between China and Russia. So you have the two superpowers, China and Russia, very, very powerful economically. China being the first economy in the world today, largest economy in the world today, largest mass producer, largest economy. Russia following a close second in value, not necessarily the biggest producer, but in value because of its resources in oil and gas. And then you have the massive reserves of financial wealth in Saudi Arabia, and also the natural reserves in Iran. We also have to remember that geopolitically, Iran is connected to every single other Muslim nation in Southwest Asia, and it has done that over a period of over 100 years. Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, right all the way through into the Far East. Why did they do this? Simply because the Persian Empire, back in the day when Alexander the Great was rampaging around in the East, the Persian Empire was actually all the way past India, going into the Far East. As
And
far
that's
as
the same as the Ottoman Empire, right?
Well, no, the Ottoman Empire is it's basically the Turks and so on, but to the north. Okay, so the Ottoman Empire was Turkey, present day Turkey,
Hmm.
and so on. But the
And
Persian Empire, don't forget the Turks and the Persians have been at each other's throats for many, many, many centuries. But
mhm.
the Persian Empire has geopolitical and cultural links right across Southwest Asia, all the way into southern China. What we have to remember is that the trigger for the Third World War, should it start in the Middle East, will be a coalition of the Muslim, okay, against Christendom. And that is precisely what the letter that Albert Pike wrote in the formation of the Illuminati
Mm.
had said. And he said, this the Third World War is to create the destruction of Christendom and the Muslim faith, so that nations are exhausted. All nations are exhausted in the final solution of the destruction of these two entities, and then Armageddon. In other words, nuclear war. And that's precisely what we're staring down the barrel of right now.
Mm.
We're staring down the barrel of the Third World War, which is in the hands of a decrepit, demented president of the United States of America that is being run and being controlled from behind the scenes. He's not making
Mhm.
the decisions. The decisions that the
But
United States of America is making in concert with other irresponsible individuals in Europe, such as Keir Starmer in Britain, as well as Rutte in Germany, and so on and so forth, that are calling for the reinforcement of Ukraine and the use of long range tactical weapons into Russia. It only takes for one thing to escalate beyond what someone can control, and you have a nuclear conflict on your hands.
so,
It is my opinion. It is my
mhm.
opinion that the nuclear exchange will not happen in Ukraine between Russia and the West. I firmly believe that Israel is going to kick off the nuclear exchange with a tactical nuclear weapon into Lebanon.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that because that's an important point. But just to back up a little bit, I'm hearing a lot of religious terms and a lot of religion here. I'm
Mhm.
hearing Armageddon and I'm
Mhm.
hearing Muslim versus Christians annihilating each other.
That's
Mr.
correct.
Shields, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, I'll probably take another angle to it because none of these points are irrelevant or should be ignored. But to me, the way I see it, the whole goal, and it's been going on since World War One and World War Two, going back to the Tsar in 1917, uh, is and the creation of the Bretton Woods institution, which gives you the United Nations, the League of Nations, Emperor Haile Selassie. Uh, there is one common thread that is still playing out, that has not expired, and is pulling everything together, and that is global domination. You could see World War One and Two as European tribal war, fighting for control. Who is going to have say? We saw that happen uh, during the 400-year slavery, uh, transatlantic slavery that took place, right? European powers fighting each other for domination but then they were under a single flag, which was given the command, and that was the Vatican. Uh, so, what yeah, because they gave the powers to the each European nation to be able to go out there and capture any land and declare it in the name of their country, provided the inhabitants were not Christians. And obviously, they were coming into lands where the inhabitants were not Christians. So and so that's the backstory to that. So but coming forward, what I'm saying is it's the same game, the same thread being played out, and that's what you know Bush's New World Order statement was all about, right? And that triggered the war in Iraq, uh, and the New World Order is one, and Fred can speak eloquently on this, where they're trying to move from fossil fuel technologies into so-called renewable energy, which is not really feasible, uh, but at the center of this is a depopulation agenda to move us into transhumanism, um, where a certain region of the world, probably under the Zionist philosophy. Zionism is a philosophy, it's a political philosophy, it is not a religion. You don't have to be Jewish to be Zionist, as Biden will tell you. And this philosophy goes back to even to those same ancient cultures that we talked about in the West, the Canaanites, the Carthaginians, who practice this way of political domination, or political hierarchy. Put it
What
that
is the philosophy? Is the philosophy global domination? What is the philosophy?
the goal is global domination.
So that's
It's
the
always
philosophy.
it's always to create one center,
So
because
it's like the Tower of Babel.
well, not really. The
No,
Tower of Babel was quite different. Well,
wasn't
yes,
the
you're correct.
objective?
You are correct. Yes, yes, that's correct, Joseph. The Tower of Babel was being created to make the earth in Iraq, the center of communication with extraterrestrial territories, those beyond the wall, which they would now see as outer space. And the gods came down, the higher gods came down and said, no, we're not going to have any of this. Destroy it. So,
So
so
I mean,
yes,
this is getting really serious, you know.
it is to bring it back to a center. And the same thing with the New World Order. It's to bring everything back to a center. So where's that center going to be? It's going to be under the idea of a rules based, not law based, rules based order,
So
using certain method of warfare that has an ideological or religious overtone to it, because it's sold in narratives and not in facts.
mhm. So if I were to ask Mr. Corbin to jump in now, Mr. Corbin, what I'm hearing here is something that I think you relate to quite well. It's almost like we're seeing biblical prophetic elements playing out in terms of the battle between good and evil, and one side trying to get the world to bow down to it and to worship it and to be governed by it, whatever it is. And of course, the alternative side, which for those in Christendom, depending on which version of Christendom you're in as well, you see as God the Creator demanding our obedience and worship of what is called a true and living God and the laws that surrounds that versus the laws of man and man trying to take the seat of God, which is what we saw with Nebuchadnezzar in the Babylon story, and the period he spent being mad versus recognizing that he's not God after all. Your thoughts, Mr. Corbin?
Well, I think it's important to look at the current situation. And while, yes, there is a tremendous amount of biblical prophecy and prophetic interest in this particular topic, we also have to look to the original premise surrounding what is actually happening in the world today that has been foretold in that letter by Albert Pike with regard to the three world wars. And I'm not discounting what you said with regard to the biblical side, but we also have to look at why is the most powerful or the second most powerful nation on earth, which is Russia, currently in the situation that it is in. Why Russia is in the situation it is in is because Russia is an Orthodox Christian country. Remember that.
More religion there. What is the significance of being an Orthodox Christian country?
Well, Orthodox Christian country follows the original scriptures, not the translations. The Orthodox Christians follow the Word of God compared to the translations of the Bible and so on, which take different sects and the Protestants and the Catholics and so on and so forth. This is the original Orthodox Christianity. Russia is the Orthodox Christian country. Remember what the letter said, to bring Christendom against the Muslim world. The second most powerful country in the world, militarily as well as economically, is an Orthodox Christian country. What are they fighting? They are fighting the exact same powers of evil that were driven into their lands all those years ago. How many times did the czars of Russia drive these Zionists or Khazarian mafia, these usury practitioners, out of their lands? We have to remember that today's Zionists or the Khazarian mafia have been evicted from every single country that they occupied over 150 times in 3,000 years. The czars of Russia invaded Ukraine and kicked them out of Ukraine 14 times in the future. This is number 15.
Yeah. Could it be though that from another perspective, that at the end of the day, this is all about money and power?
Yes, it is, because then I'm getting to that. Having created the special military operation, President Putin is defending Russian territory. Remember, under the Soviet Union, the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the Soviet Union actually was made up of all of the territories that are in Eastern Europe that in 1991, with the fall of the Soviet Union, became independent territories. Ukraine itself is actually made up of territories of three different countries. Poland, Russia, and to the south, part of the Balkans. What has happened is that you're seeing the Russian-speaking provinces of Ukraine being defended by Russia. they have gotten into they've retaken the 5 provinces, okay, in the Donbass. So you have Zaporizhia, you have Kherson, you have um, the the Donbass region itself, and then you have the Odessa region and Sevastopol and Crimea. Sevastopol being the capital city of Crimea. That particular area has always been Russian speaking. Now, what happened with regard to in 1991, James Baker III, who is the United States Secretary of State, told um, Putin that NATO would not expand 1 inch to the east.
Mhm.
That was complete and total deception. And by 2005, Ukraine was in the position where it was being carved up by the oligarchs for their own use, right on Russia's doorstep. President Putin came to the United Nations. He came to the Geneva Convention. He came to many, many different forums and issued proposals for the non-expansion of NATO. He issued proposals for limiting the expansion of NATO into Russian territory. Do not do this. This is not going to sit well with us. We are not going to allow this to happen. And in 2014, the coup that was organized by the United States of America to overthrow Viktor Yushchenko and install Zelensky took place. And immediately, Zelensky mobilized the Ukrainian army, which had been under buildup by the United States of America for 8 years, into action against the Russian-speaking provinces and the territories that were supported by Russia.
Mhm.
That went
So,
on for 8 years, from 2014 to 2022, until Putin said enough is enough, and then
mhm.
carried out the special military operation. Russia at no time provoked the West at any point in time. Russia was provoked by the West repeatedly, repeated provocations which are still ongoing today, which
Mhm.
has led to the special military operation by Russia. But
So, so
you're
let me
bringing, go ahead.
let me just interrupt a little bit. So basically, what you're saying is that when the USSR fell in 1991,
That's right.
which caused the breakup of all those other regions that now became countries, about 15 of them.
Hmm.
Um, Russia and the United States came to an understanding that they would not expand NATO um, into all of these countries leading up to Ukraine, which is just next door. And you're suggesting that the Americans reneged on this promise.
Absolutely.
And having done so, the Russians felt they have no alternative but to retaliate in order to prevent what is their own existential, their own existence, a threat to
Precisely.
their own existence. Because
Yes.
if Ukraine becomes a NATO ally, um, and they control vast, you know, mineral reserves, or not even minerals so much. I think they have some oil reserves as well that are being looked into. Russia also pipes oil through Ukraine, and Ukraine is in a very strategic position that could compromise the security of Russia. And Russia wants to prevent that compromise, and thought they had a gentleman's agreement of sort with the US, which has been violated, and is bringing Ukraine closer and closer to becoming a NATO ally, which would then be completely anathema for Russia. Now, here's the thing: isn't Ukraine? Don't they have the right to choose who they align themselves with?
Not
Uh,
anymore.
uh,
Not
what I'm
anymore.
saying, well, just back up for a second. If they are an independent state, meaning they're independent, they're free to do whatever they want to do with themselves. Are they not free to join any alliance that they, as an independent nation, would choose to? And for Russia, on the other hand, does the fact that your neighbor may decide to join another alliance gives you the right to invade your neighbor's territory. That's the argument that could be posited. What is your response to that?
Well, as I said, reinforcing the fact that the Russian speaking, predominantly always Russian inhabitants of the five regions in eastern Ukraine, they have always been Russian. They have always been Russian since the 8th century,
Mm-hmm.
and
But they're now a part of a different territory, independent territory.
well, allegedly independent territory.
Right, allegedly independent. I
Yeah,
mean, of course, I guess, and that's why history is so important, right? We go back and we say, what is going on here? This is a game. And
yeah.
Mr. Shields, I'm sure you'd jump in here. It's a game for dominance. And so the USSR was in a serious war, Cold War with the West. They lost that war in 1991, pretty much. And now they're fighting for their survival, and they have to take steps to defend and
Well,
protect themselves.
have they really lost the war? I mean, that's really a question. I don't
Okay.
think they really
Well,
lost the war. We may want to see it that way from the West, because
mhm,
it was their social and economic system that collapsed,
mhm.
not the nation or the people of
But they
Russia.
lost territory. But they lost territories, right? They
They
lost.
lost territory because they were overweight. It's like a 300-pound, 500-pound person coming down to their proper size of 180 or 200.
Mhm,
And that's basically, and we have the same problem here too when we overreach and acquire territories and feed into territories that are beyond our capacity to maintain. Ukraine is, so I'm not sure if they lost that, although it was hailed in the West. What it allowed them to do was to restructure their economy and renegotiate their relationship with independent states, and to put everything on a level playing field, because part of the reason why Russia, USSR collapsed had more to do with economic strategy than it had to do with the euro dollar, and it had to do with interest rates, right? Making it very expensive for USSR to trade internationally, right? And that's why back in those days, you used to have the 15, 16% interest rates. It worked. It worked very well in collapsing. Furthermore, there was corruption. And if you understand the old socialist system, it wasn't a market-based system. They didn't allow companies to die. They would support them into debt, right? So it's like you have the mummy, and worshiping it, rather than burying
mhm.
it and start life anew. So they have cleaned up their act. They have merged and copied a lot of the social and economic systems that the West use. And in fact, a lot of consultants went into Russia during that period, and also into these break-off states, to help them to remodel and revitalize their economies, right, under what they call private sector initiatives.
Mhm.
Okay, so what has happened is that, and the reason why I say they did not collapse, because they still had nuclear power. They still had a formidable force. The Russian scientists were no less capable than the American scientists, right?
Well,
They went up.
there's no doubt that Russia remained a strong power in the world with certain strategic advantages, but definitely lost their status that they had before as the USSR, and find themselves now in this particular position where others are encroaching on their borders, and you know setting up even economic structures that could cut off their abilities to be an economic powerful nation. But the bottom line is that now we're at this point, and what
A
will
lot,
be,
not to cut you, but a lot of
yeah,
it was ideological. The communist
meaning,
theory, the communist
oh, of
idea,
course,
right?
absolutely, yeah,
And
absolutely, yeah.
right. So
That was their downfall, actually. I
wait,
think. I mean, if had they found a way to,
but isn't it that same idea of subservience, of keeping people on marginal subsidized income. Isn't
That's where
that
we're
that same
heading.
idea?
It's
Okay.
funny. But what happened is, it's who, the whole idea, I think you said it earlier on, the domination, it's who is doing the dominating. So, if you're doing the dominating, even though I want to be the dominator, I'm not going to support you. I'm going to destroy you to make the dominate. So while the USSR was a communist country trying to apply communist principles, which cannot work. And by the way, there's a difference, eh? Communism versus a centralized dictatorship, they're similar but different, because one is claiming it's trying to make us all equal, while the other one is going to be simply dominion over you as a god. And that's the end. Communism leads to that, unfortunately, no matter how they try to make it something else. Socialism also leads to that. But the bottom line is this: I think you're onto something when you talk about the goal is really dominion. And I think, Fred, you mentioned it, the one world order.
Mhm.
And so somebody or somebodies, maybe, and as you said, the Zionist is a philosophy, it's not a religion. So I
It
want to get
captured
down
the religion. It captured
to
the
capture the
Jewish
religion.
faith. Right.
Yes, and they're now using that as a disguise
And you have
for,
strong resistance
yeah.
amongst Jews against Zionism.
Yes, there are some Jews that are strongly against Zionism, of course. But back to the potential for World War III now, because what has Biden done, and what does this mean? How will this be? Can this be a trigger? What he has done recently in his the last waning months of his presidency. How do you view that, Mr. Corbyn, his recent actions?
Well, I think that the there is no question in anyone's mind that there is a certain studious level of insanity that pervades everything in the Democratic Party of the United States of America. In addition to that, you have the exact same copycat attitude in the elites of Europe. President Macron, he wants to use weapons into Russia. You have this former British intelligence leader of MI6 reinforcing that idea. You have Keir Starmer, who is about as thick as two short planks when it comes to any level of intelligence.
So
And
why are they doing this though? What is
well,
why are they so hell bent on doing this?
you have to remember this that you have to remember the powerful players that are behind this. The very, very powerful players are behind this. You
Hmm.
have the world financial oligarchs in BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard who own Ukraine. Because you have to remember that Volodymyr Zelensky, the de facto dictator president of Ukraine, signed over the sovereignty of the state of the nation of Ukraine to the United States in 2023.
When you say sign over, what do you mean? What did he sign?
He signed a document
Hmm.
that signed over the entire country of Ukraine and all of its natural resources to Monsanto,
Okay.
Cargill,
Okay.
DuPont.
You mean
Um,
similar to Ghana?
well, exactly. But Vanguard,
And
well,
Jamaica.
Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street basically bought the entire country, and the Chinese. The Chinese bought a 9% stake in
But let's be
Ukraine.
clear though, because when you speak, Fred,
Same
sometimes
thing
people
happened in Jamaica. They've sold off all the assets.
exactly.
What's the
So
difference?
Yeah.
Who in Jamaica
exactly.
owns anything?
So what you're saying is, just to be clear, they have signed over rights
Mhm.
to their natural resources, and
Yep.
by extension, the sovereignty of their nation. So
Precisely. So
like,
no, now what happens is that because Biden is being controlled by these elites behind the scenes,
mhm.
led through the APAC consortium or lobby in the United States of America, you have to recognize that both parties in the United States of America are run by APAC,
Mhm.
and lots of people
What
don't
what is
know.
APAC? Sorry, what is APAC?
APAC is the American Israel um, Public Affairs Committee. They're
Okay.
a pro-Israel lobbying group that are about 5 million strong in America, and they control Congress. They control both
How,
parties,
how
and
do
they
they
have
control them? By what means do they control them?
money. Not only that, but they own the large companies in the military-industrial complex.
Got it. So basically, just like here in Jamaica and many other countries,
Hmm.
the powerful, moneyed elites, the
Hmm.
oligarchs, they control the political enterprise and therefore they pull the strings.
Precisely.
Are you saying that they control Mr. Trump as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Now,
So,
the most important thing to remember here. Let's
mhm,
stick a pin here for a moment. Let's get back to the original question. What is Biden doing? The reason that Biden has this protracted provocation of Russia is that in the event that a nuclear exchange was triggered between the United States of America and Russia, which God forbid happens, if it should cooler heads prevail on the Russian side than they do in the West. But the most important thing to remember is that Biden is trying to hand over a failed legacy
mhm,
and drop it in this lap of Donald Trump. What is also happening is that the owners of the natural resources of Ukraine are begging for a nuclear exchange to happen between Russia and the United States of America in the vain belief that they can defeat Russia using nuclear weapons in order to seize Ukraine entirely for
mhm,
themselves.
mhm,
If a nuclear war happens and Russia is forced to retreat, Ukraine becomes all theirs,
mhm,
and you have the richest country in the world on your hands.
mhm. It would have also meant though that you would also have Russia as well.
Well,
I
you
mean,
wouldn't.
if you have a
No,
nuclear
no,
war that
no. You wouldn't have Russia. You would have certain portions of Western Russia, St.
Mhm.
Petersburg, Moscow, various places like that. You wouldn't have the Far East. You wouldn't have Siberia,
Yeah.
because Putin did exactly what what the what Stalin did in the Second World War.
Ah, okay. Mhm.
When Germany invaded Russia in 1941
Yeah.
in Operation Barbarossa, Stalin moved all of the Russian war production into Siberia.
Mhm.
Putin has just done the exact same thing.
Mhm. Yeah.
Every single major
Unreachable.
military, yeah, every single
Exactly.
major military complex has been duplicated several times in the Russian Far East, closer to
Mhm.
the Chinese border, simply
Yeah.
because he recognizes that raw materials as well as oil and gas from China flowing in both directions are more economical to have large industries in a protected area. Not only that, but the majority of Russia's air force and air power to protect those areas
Mhm.
is located in the Far East,
Mhm.
the
And
Russian
that's
Far East.
and that's
Now,
very historical. I mean, historically, Russia has always relied on its geography to win
precisely,
every
because
war, or at least
because
not to
because
lose.
yes, because Russia is has historically a great power. The United States of America is a maritime power. They project their power over the ocean and in the air. They cannot fight wars outside of their own territories for very long, protracted periods of time. Neither can Russia, but Russia has land mass and geography on its side. It's a great power from that perspective, is that it can march into other territories and keep supply chains and logistics chains open for indefinite periods of time. The most important thing we have to remember, what is happening here right now, is that the provocation that you're seeing, and hence leading to the bill of impeachment, which has been drafted by Professor Francis Boyle, is that if you were to impeach Biden and it was successful, the entire BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street buyout of Ukraine would collapse overnight, and they're not willing to lose that bottom
Right.
line because
So that means
it's worth 700 trillion.
it's not going to happen. So
It's not going to happen.
there's not going to be any impeachment. So,
No.
gentlemen, we've come to the end pretty much. We're going to wrap up with our final thoughts now on this matter. How likely do you see us having World War III within the year 2025, Mr. Shields?
Um, Not likely. And the reason is that if it were to happen it won't happen under a Trump administration. I don't believe, because number one, it never happened. It didn't happen when he was there for the first 4 years. But his strategy is quite different.
Hmm.
It is to bring about peace, and it is also to create new relationship with adversary and so forth. That's quite clear. So it wouldn't happen under a Trump administration in 2025. But what's happening now is that the present administration, in a last ditch effort to, basically trigger an event that can turn the tables and the tides, is pressing for some kind of, it's a provocation to trigger a nuclear exchange.
Mhm.
And so these 2 months becomes very critical, that does not happen. And Europe is on edge right now, and because of the mainstream media in northern south in North America, the population here is probably not as informed as to the gravity of the situation that's at hand, right?
Mhm.
So, but the whole goal with Russia, why Russia has been targeted, is that the New World Order cannot go forward if Russia remains as a federation. I mean, that's quite clear.
As a
So,
federation, what do you mean as a federation?
as a federal government governing the entire Russian territory, it's a
Okay, so you
federation.
so, so
It's a
there's a so
federation.
you're saying there's a design to break up Russia as it is now,
Oh yes,
Yeah.
further
that
break it
is
up.
the
Mhm.
goal. That
Okay,
has always been the goal.
so
Uh,
the outside forces want to take territory away from Russia, in as much as Russia
it's
is seen as taking
Ukraine is just
territory.
a pawn.
Yeah.
Ukraine is a resource pawn, right?
Mhm.
It provides the best agricultural land, minerals, and so on.
Mhm.
Um, uh, you know, but it's not about Ukraine. It's about destabilizing Russia politically. It's not just destabilizing it. It's about breaking it up, because you cannot have the West having a center out of EU or North America or the Middle East, wherever that center is going to be, uh, under a single flagpole dominating the world, with Russia being strong.
So what you're saying, Mr. Shields, is in order for us to have global domination, of those who want to have global domination, the piece of the puzzle which is standing in the way of global domination is Russia and not China.
Nope.
China would be next. They have a strategy for China when they finish with Russia. It's kind of like that.
Okay, so there are two pieces of the puzzle standing in the way: Russia and China. That's what you're seeing.
Right now, I think the focus has always been on Russia, more so, at least
Okay.
over the past 10 years. Because before that, the relationships were pretty good between the US and Russia. It
Hmm.
only broke apart in 2014. Um, uh, you know, but no, because Russia is part of Europe. It's still a part of Europe. China's to the east. It's
Hmm.
far
Okay.
away.
So,
Australia can take
so,
care of that.
so they want a really unified Europe, you're saying?
Not really. I think that was the goal in the past.
Mm. It's
I
it's
think
still it's not a goal now. They don't want to
no.
unify Europe.
It
No.
depends on which political ideology wins out at the end of the day. There's
Mm.
two competing sides. One is to bastardize Europe by bringing in all these immigrants, and we've seen that happen over the past, maybe,
Oh, you're anti-immigrants. You'll get
anti
you'll get cancelled for that,
hold on, anti-immigrants.
you said they're bastardizing Europe with bringing in immigrants, and those are serious words that would get you canceled.
Yes, yes. It is very important that we face what is going on, because the same thing is going to be happening in the Caribbean as well, in
Hmm.
terms of moving population from Antigua to Jamaica and elsewhere. Mr. Corbin can cover that topic very eloquently. But the purpose is not to bring them under a federation, it's to destabilize the cohesive, um, uh, fabric of the society, and we see that
Interesting.
happening in the United States today.
Well, we're going to
Uh,
have another discussion on that because that's a so our next topic is going to be the impact of immigration and what is being done in terms of manipulating us through that. So let's stick a pin for that one. Mr. Corbin, your final thoughts are on the likelihood of a World War III by the end of 2025. What are your thoughts?
Well, in reinforcing the point that Russia is the sticking point to achieving global domination, and there's a reason for that, because with Russia out of the picture, the arch enemy that the United States of America has always wanted to defeat would then be fair game for the taking, and that is Iran. You cannot defeat Iran while Russia is still a military force and while China is still a military force. So you have to defeat Russia through economic destabilization and destroying the fabric of its socio-domestic policies within its own society and creating division and coups and so on, and basically putting it back to the USSR days. And then you would have to go to China and try to destroy China, which is never going to happen. So the entire delusional ideology of the West at this particular point in time is one that is based in not only strategic failure, but is also underpinned by a level of a serious lack of knowledge of both countries, both Russia and China. You speak to anyone in the State Department or anyone in a position of the Democratic Party, and they are completely and totally ignorant of culture, of economics, of finance, or anything to do with the military or anything of either China or Russia. All they do is that they look at what's on Google and they spout the rhetoric and so on and so forth. You cannot have a one world government as long as Russia and China are the dominant forces, because you cannot defeat Iran. Not only that, but you also have to remember that historically, Iran as a country and as a nation has only been defeated once in its entire history.
Pause for 1 second, because you're making a very, very important point. But my producer is telling me that I need to show this, and then we're going to come right back to your point before we close. Very important point. Don't lose it.
Sure.
Hi everyone, this is Charlotte, and I hope you're doing great. I'm just stopping by to say hello and to remind you that UIC's annual Christmas fundraising banquet will be December 14th, 2024, starting at 5 p.m. This year, our location will be Summit Kingston, formerly called Knutsford Court Hotel, which is at 11 Ruthven Road, Kingston 10. As you may know, UIC Jamaica is 100% committed to good governance and aims to unite, liberate, and empower our people. If you desire to see Jamaica become the paradise it should be, clean, safe, beautiful, and orderly, then your contribution of 10,000 Jamaican dollars or 65 US per adult and 5,000 Jamaican dollars or 35 US per child will help us to provide a new leadership, a new system for a new Jamaica. We promise an evening with lots of fun, lively entertainment, great speeches, and delicious food. While it would be my greatest desire to see you all in person, I know some may not make it home for Christmas, but your donation will give someone less fortunate the opportunity to attend. Thank you so much for taking part in helping us to educate and work with our citizens to restore and in some cases rebuild our beautiful country. Here are your options to purchase your ticket. You can go to www.uicjamaica.com and pay online, or you can send payment via Western Union, MoneyGram, Zelle, Cash App, or bank transfer. Call 876-293-0812 for additional information. To RSVP, you can email us at info@uicjamaica.com, or you can WhatsApp us at 876-293-0812. Thanks a million for making this possible. One Jamaica, stronger together.
All right, welcome back, gentlemen. Mr. Corbin, you were making a very important point there a while ago about, I heard there are three countries really that are at the epicenter, if you will, Russia, Iran, and China. And he
That's
made a
correct.
very valid point that, Russia, of course, is a part of the European side, and you have China over there in the east, but you have this Middle East question sitting there. Tell us some
That's
more
correct.
about.
Well, we have to remember that historically, Iran has only ever been conquered once in its entire history, and that was by Alexander the Great. And that didn't last very long.
Mhm.
The Persian Empire has always been the most resilient, and added to that, part of Iran, or part of the Persian Empire, was the country of Afghanistan, which has never been conquered by any power.
Mhm.
Okay? So, when you look at the Afghan national identity, 98% of their population are Persian in origin. You, as I said before, Iran has its tentacles right through the entire Southwest Asia. You will never have a one world order as long as Iran remains a credible nation state in its own sovereignty. And that was not set to change anytime soon, because the delusional ideology of the West, who thinks that they can defeat Iran while Russia and China are still great powers, is based on absolute amateur stupidity. The
So
most
no,
important thing for all of us to remember is that Iran is not going to be the trigger of a third world war. The trigger of a third world war is going to be Israel,
mm,
because you have a belligerent, tiny nation state run by a lunatic who is still trying to maintain the lie of the Jewish cause. That's the
all
problem.
right, okay. So there we have it,
To me,
folks.
that's all theater, you know. To me, that's all theater. And what's really driving things uh, is, is, is goals and objectives that have been set a long time ago, a
Yeah.
hundred or more years ago.
So the bottom line is this, Mr. Shields and Mr. Corbin. The goals may have been set many years ago. They're working their way out gradually. The issue is whether or not they're going to succeed, but whether or not they succeed, there'll be a lot of casualties along the way.
Hmm.
And many people will die, many people will lose their rights and freedoms, and destruction, like we're seeing in even Ukraine right now, the destruction that's happening there. I think they've lost about 100,000 people so far. Many lives.
600,000.
600,000. So that's a lot, right? So it's going to be painful either way. They may not achieve their ultimate goals in our lifetime, but they will achieve a lot of damage in the process, whoever they
The
are.
stakes are very high.
The
The
stakes are
stakes
very
are
high.
very high.
Yeah.
You're looking at the potential and most likely, I would
Mhm.
say, definite breakup of the European Union. That's
Yep.
Mhm.
on the table right now.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And that's why the attempt it's a last ditch effort. It's a desperate act,
Mhm.
to turn the tables at the last minute, because you're basically going to get a house cleaning taking place uh, if Donald Trump's make it into office by January 20th. That
That's
triggers a whole new era, which would result in a revolution in Europe, among the people of Europe, against the white wing establishments there, or whatever wing it is that's calling the shots,
it's funny.
and
Yes. Yes.
and the breakup of NATO itself is at risk. Those are the two critical things that we have to watch unfold between 2025 and 2027.
You made a very important statement that if Donald Trump makes it into office, so are you suggesting that there might be some problem between now and January when he's inaugurated?
It's the
It,
most
it, it, it,
dangerous,
would-
most dangerous time in history.
Yes.
it wouldn't be like, those fake assassination attempts that took place, that you
Mhm.
can analyze inside out and see exactly. It would be more a seismic shift in the structure of things, where martial law can be declared, let's say January 5th or so, and then some kind of political process or transitory process, interim, you know
Mhm.
put into place
Yeah.
to block uh, that transition from taking place. But it wouldn't be personal per se.
Okay. Well, everyone that's watching, stay tuned. We'll see how this plays out. I certainly hope we don't have a World War III in 2025 or anytime soon. But it's not in our hands. Our job is to make sure that we do our best to educate our people and provide the leadership that we can. So thank you both, gentlemen, for being here tonight. The next time we meet, hopefully, we're going to be talking about immigration and the impact that is having around the world and how it might impact us here in the Caribbean. Hope to see you all at our annual banquet. Thanks to both of you gentlemen for your contribution to the same. And Fred, looking forward to seeing you on Jamaican soil again soon. Take care.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
All the best. Have a good night,
All right.
gentlemen. Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye-bye. Good night. Okay, friends, thank you all for being on with us again. Hope to see you at the banquet on December 14th at the summit. And hopefully you've gotten your tickets already or you're in the process of doing so. And you know how to get it. Our website, uicjamaica.com. And you can call us or WhatsApp at 876-293-0812. Tomorrow night, we have another discussion. It's on the matter of investing in cryptocurrency. So I'm looking forward to talking to you about that and to shed some more light on our Capital Club and how that is going. Once again, have a good night. And remember, one Jamaica, because we are indeed stronger together. See you soon. Take care.